Have you ever wondered if you're doing something that quietly pushes people away, but no one tells you to your face? It's a hard question, but an important one. As we get older, we settle into our routines. We speak our minds more freely. We stop worrying so much about appearances or what others think. And in many ways, that's a good thing. You've earned the right to feel comfortable in your own skin. But here's the catch. Comfort can sometimes become a blindfold. Certain habits that feel harmless to us might quietly cause discomfort to others. A comment said in jest. A story repeated one too many times. A refusal to try something new. These things add up, not because people don't care about you, but because they do. They just don't know how to say it without hurting your feelings. So instead, they adjust. They call less often. They stay a little more guarded. And slowly, a distance grows, not because you've changed completely, but because no one ever told you what they saw. That's why this video exists. It's not about judgment or shame. It's about awareness. About shining a gentle light on the things we may not even realize we're doing and offering a kinder way forward. Today, we're going to explore 12 quiet habits that can create unintended distance between you and the people you care about. Habits that are common in older adults, but rarely talked about out loud. And here's the good news. These behaviors are not permanent. They're fixable. Often, it just takes a small shift in awareness to make a big change in how others experience you and how you experience yourself. So I invite you to stay with me until the end. You might be surprised how just one of these small changes could bring you closer to the people who matter most. Let's begin with something simple but powerful. Neglecting personal hygiene. It often starts so subtly that we don't even notice. Maybe it's skipping a shower because the morning felt rushed. Maybe it's wearing the same shirt for the third day in a row because it still smells fine. Or maybe it's just not bothering to trim your nails or brush your hair because, well, you're not going anywhere special. And while it might feel like no big deal to you, the truth is others notice. They won't say it out loud. They won't embarrass you, but they do adjust. They might lean away instead of closer. They might stop initiating hugs. Visits get shorter. Conversations grow polite but distant. And here's the thing. It's not about being shallow or judging your appearance. It's about what personal care signals. A study by the National Institutes of Health found that as people age, nearly 35% report a decline in regular hygiene habits, often due to energy levels, depression, or physical discomfort. But the unspoken message it sends to others is deeper. I don't care about myself anymore. And when people sense that, they subconsciously respond in kind. They treat you with a little less warmth, a little less closeness, even if they love you. I once met a gentleman named Harold. He was 74, funny, smart, and full of stories. But over time, his children stopped bringing the grandkids around. He thought they were just busy. The truth? His daughter later admitted the kids didn't like hugging Grandpa anymore. His clothes smelled like old food, and his beard was always unkempt. It broke his heart. But the moment he took small steps, fresh clothes, a bit of cologne, trimming his beard, things shifted. The grandkids snuggled up again. The visits felt warm again. That's the quiet power of hygiene. It tells people, I still respect myself. I still care about this moment with you. And you don't need to look like a model or follow fashion trends. Just showing up clean, tidy, and intentional can change the energy in the room. People respond to your presence before they respond to your words. And when your appearance says, I still show up for life, they'll show up for you too. So if there's one easy place to start reconnecting with others, it's at the bathroom mirror. Not out of vanity, out of quiet dignity. And that's a message worth sending. Just as personal hygiene quietly shapes how people respond to your presence, the way you speak can just as quietly shape how they feel in your presence. That brings us to the second habit, speaking without a filter. As we get older, something curious often happens. The inner voice that used to say, maybe keep that to yourself, starts to fade. You might find yourself saying exactly what's on your mind without stopping to think how it lands. And it's understandable. After all, you've lived through decades. earned your stripes, and may feel like you've got nothing to prove. But here's the thing, while it may feel freeing to just say it, the people on the other side often feel something very different: discomfort. There's a fine line between honesty and bluntness, and when that line gets crossed too often, people start pulling back. They may still love you, but they brace for your comments. According to a 2021 study from the University of Michigan, over 40% of adults over age 60 admit to being more outspoken than they used to be. And among their younger family members, nearly 60% say they've felt hurt or uncomfortable by those unfiltered remarks, even if they never said so. Why? Because it's hard to tell someone you love that their words sting. You might think you're just being direct, but what others hear is criticism, especially when it comes to sensitive topics like their appearance, parenting, finances, or relationships. I once met a woman named Marie, 68 years old, full of life and sharp humor, but she had a habit of making little truthful comments during family dinners. Things like, "You've gained some weight, huh?" Or, "When are you finally going to settle down?" She meant no harm, just thought she was being real. But over time, her son stopped coming by with his wife. Her niece avoided phone calls, and no one told her why, until she asked. When she realized her words had been landing like arrows instead of insights, she made a small change. She began pausing before she spoke, asking herself, "Is this kind? Is this helpful? Or is this just my frustration leaking out?" And the shift was remarkable. Her family leaned back in, laughter came easier, conversations lasted longer. The truth is, you don't have to silence yourself. You just need to add a little softness to your wisdom. Speak like someone who's been through life and still chooses compassion. If a comment wouldn't feel good coming toward your grandchild, maybe it doesn't need to be said to someone else's. Because people remember not just what you said, but how it made them feel. And when your words build connection instead of defense, you become someone others seek out, not someone they avoid. That's a quiet superpower, and it's never too late to reclaim it. And just like our words reveal how we see others, the clothes we wear quietly reveal how we see ourselves. That leads us to the third habit, wearing clothes that don't fit anymore. Now, this isn't about being fashionable or dressing like someone half your age. It's about something deeper, how your clothing reflects your self-respect and emotional presence. Over time, it's easy to settle into a comfort zone. That old pair of pants feels familiar. The shirt from 15 years ago still fits, sort of. And those worn-out shoes? They've molded perfectly to your feet. But here's the catch. What feels comfortable to you may look careless to others. According to a 2022 study published in Psychology and Aging, people tend to make rapid judgments about someone's vitality and confidence based on appearance alone. And clothing that appears outdated or ill-fitting was one of the top factors that influenced how older adults were perceived socially. And that perception matters. It affects how people treat you, listen to you, and even how close they feel to you. I once worked with a man named Frank. He was 72, a retired engineer, bright and articulate, but he always wore stretched-out sweatpants and a faded t-shirt with a hole near the neckline. He thought, "Why change? I'm just being myself." But over time, he noticed something odd. People in his church group stopped asking him to lead discussions. New members often overlooked him, and he felt invisible. When a close friend gently suggested he freshen up his wardrobe not for vanity but to reflect his dignity, he was hesitant. But eventually he tried. He bought a clean button-up shirt, a pair of well-fitting jeans, and some new walking shoes. And almost overnight, the shift was palpable. People made eye contact. They smiled more. He felt seen. Not because he looked younger, but because he looked present. The truth is, your clothing sends a message before you ever say a word. And when you wear something that fits well, looks cared for, and aligns with who you are today, not who you were 20 years ago, you're telling the world, I still show up with pride. You don't need to spend a fortune or follow every trend. Just choosing pieces that reflect your current body, coloring, and personality can make all the difference. Because even the subtlest changes in appearance affect how others relate to you and how you feel about yourself. If you've ever noticed people treating you a bit differently and couldn't figure out why, this might be the quiet reason. So take a moment to look in the mirror, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Ask yourself, does this still represent who I am today? When the outside reflects the strength and grace within, people respond with warmth, with respect, and with renewed connection. If this message resonates with you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might appreciate it, and comment below, what's one small wardrobe change you're willing to make this week? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And just as our clothing reflects how we show up in the world, the way we hold space in a conversation reveals how we connect with others. That brings us to the fourth habit, dominating conversations or interrupting too often. Now, this habit rarely comes from a bad place. Most of the time, it stems from enthusiasm, from wisdom, from genuinely wanting to help or relate. You've lived through enough to have something valuable to say. But sometimes, in that eagerness to share, we forget to pause. We forget to leave room. You're in the middle of a family gathering, and someone starts telling a story about a recent trip. You remember a similar one, and suddenly you're talking. Then you start explaining what they should do next time, and before you know it, the topic has shifted completely, and you're the only one speaking. It happens more often than we think, and while no one will say, "You're taking over," you'll feel it in other ways. People stop telling full stories. They glance at the clock. Conversations become surface level. According to a 2020 report by the American Psychological Association, younger adults report feeling disconnected or overridden in 1 out of 3 conversations with an older family member, primarily because they felt they weren't being heard. That statistic might sound harsh, but it points to something we can change. I once met a retired teacher named Linda, 70 years old, warm-hearted, and insightful. But her adult children often stayed quiet at dinners, and her granddaughter rarely opened up. One day, her daughter gently said, "Mom, sometimes it feels like there's no room to speak." At first, Linda was hurt, but then she started observing herself. She realized she had a habit of jumping in, finishing people's sentences, correcting them, or adding her advice before they'd finished their thought. So she tried a new approach. She asked more questions. She waited for the full sentence. She let her granddaughter finish her story even if it took longer. And slowly, the dynamic shifted. Her family leaned in. Conversations deepened. Because the truth is, people don't just want to hear wisdom, they want to be heard too. Listening isn't passive. It's one of the most generous things you can do. It tells someone, you matter. Your voice belongs here. And ironically, the less you dominate a conversation, the more people actually seek your voice. The more you pause, the more weight your words carry. So next time you find yourself jumping in, try holding back just a little. Not because you have nothing to say, but because what others have to say matters too. When people feel heard, they feel safe. And in that safety, real connection begins to grow. And once we learn to listen more, it becomes easier to notice the subtle tone we use when we do speak, especially when it comes to the next habit, constantly criticizing younger generations. It might begin as a passing comment, "Kids these days don't know how to work hard," or "No one respects their elders anymore." Maybe it slips out when you see someone glued to their phone or hear a younger relative share a choice that doesn't align with your values. And you may not even think twice about it. After all, every generation has looked at the next and shaken their heads a little. But when those observations become the norm rather than the exception, something quiet but powerful happens. The younger people in your life start to shut down. They stop sharing details. They keep conversations light. They emotionally retreat, not out of rebellion, but out of self-protection. A 2019 Pew Research Center study revealed that 62% of millennials and Gen Z respondents feel judged or misunderstood by older relatives, particularly around lifestyle choices, technology use, or values. The key issue? A perceived lack of curiosity from their elders. I once spoke with a woman named Carol, age 69, who was puzzled by why her grandson never opened up. "He just grunts or gives one-word answers," she told me. But when she looked closer, she realized how often she'd made dismissive comments like, "What kind of job is that?" Or, "Back in my day, we didn't need therapy to deal with problems." To her, those statements were casual, even humorous. But to her grandson, they felt like judgment. Carol decided to try something different. The next time they sat together, she asked, "What's something about your generation you wish older people understood?" That one question opened a door. He talked more in that hour than he had in weeks, because instead of hearing criticism, he felt seen. That's the shift. You don't have to agree with everything younger people do. You don't have to adopt every trend or accept every viewpoint. But when you approach with curiosity instead of criticism, you create space for connection. You become a bridge, not a barrier. And surprisingly, when young people feel respected by you, they often return that respect tenfold. They'll listen more closely to your stories, seek out your advice, and invite you into their world. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. Respect, after all, is a two-way street. And the more you offer it forward, especially across generations, the more it comes circling back, quietly, steadily, and powerfully. And just like criticizing younger generations can create emotional distance, so can being unaware of how we affect others in shared spaces. That brings us to habit number 6, ignoring modern etiquette. These aren't dramatic offenses. They're the subtle, everyday behaviors, speaking loudly on the phone in quiet places, watching videos without headphones, standing too close in line, or leaving your shopping cart stretched across the aisle while you pause to read a label. Decades ago, these moments might have passed unnoticed. But today, in a culture that values personal space, quiet zones, and mutual respect in public settings, they stand out, and not in a good way. What makes this habit so difficult is that no one tells you when you're doing it. There's no confrontation, no raised voices, just silent reactions. A sidelong glance, a quiet step back, a seat left empty beside you. Over time, these reactions pile up in your daily life. And you start to feel something you can't quite name. Unwelcome, maybe, or invisible. According to a 2023 report from the National Institute on Aging, older adults who live alone and report frequent negative public interactions are 3 times more likely to experience chronic loneliness than those who feel socially attuned. I think of Mr. Stanley, a widower, 76, no children, living in a small apartment in town. He loved going to the local cafe every morning, ordering coffee and reading the paper. But slowly, people stopped sitting near him. He had a habit of talking to himself while reading, answering his phone on speaker, and commenting out loud about the news. He wasn't trying to bother anyone, he was just used to being alone. But the people around him didn't understand that. They saw a man disrupting the quiet. One morning, the barista politely asked if he could lower his voice. Stanley was embarrassed. He told me later, "I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. I guess I forgot how to be around people." That moment stayed with him. He made small changes, switched to headphones, greeted others quietly instead of talking over them. Within weeks, one of the regulars invited him to join their table. For the first time in months, he felt like he belonged again. That's the emotional heart of this habit. It's not about rules or trends. It's about whether your presence invites others closer or pushes them gently away. The world may have changed, but kindness still speaks the same language. And awareness, the simple act of noticing how you move through space, how your volume affects a room, how others respond, can make all the difference. Especially when you're older and living alone, your presence is your connection. You don't need to change who you are, but showing that you're still paying attention, that you still care about how others feel around you, creates a kind of quiet dignity that never goes out of style. Because no matter your age, the way you carry yourself still sends a message. And the right message can turn a lonely room into a place of belonging. And once we become more mindful of how we move through the world, it's just as important to pay attention to how we talk about the world, especially when it comes to our health. That brings us to habit number 7, constantly talking about medical problems. Now let's be honest, Getting older often means dealing with a long list of aches, medications, appointments, and procedures. It's real, it's exhausting, and sometimes it's the only thing that feels present enough to talk about. But when every conversation circles back to your bad knee, your cholesterol numbers, or the 5th time the doctor changed your dosage, something subtle happens. People stop leaning in, they stop asking questions. Not because they don't care, but because it becomes too much to carry in every interaction. According to a 2021 survey by AARP, more than 55% of adults under 40 admit to tuning out or avoiding conversations with older loved ones who constantly focus on health complaints, not out of disrespect, but because they feel helpless and overwhelmed. It creates a lopsided relationship where one person is always sharing and the other is always absorbing. I remember Dolores, a vibrant 73-year-old with a clever wit and a deep love for gardening. But after her knee surgery, every visit with friends started with pain updates and ended with medication stories. Eventually, her neighbor, someone who used to join her on walks, stopped dropping by. When Dolores asked why, the woman gently said, "I just miss talking about life, not just what hurts." It hit Dolores hard, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. She realized she'd let her health become her entire personality, so she made a shift. She still shared because health struggles matter, but she started asking more about others. She talked about the new rosebush she planted, the bird she spotted at her window, the mystery novel she just finished. And people responded. They smiled more, stayed longer. Dolores didn't have to pretend her pain was gone. She just learned to let her joy speak too. That's the key. Your health is part of your story, but it's not all of it. People want to connect with you, not just your symptoms. Let them hear your laughter, your memories, your curiosity about their world. Talk about your latest doctor visit, sure, but also ask, what's something new you've been enjoying? Because when your conversations become more balanced, people don't feel weighed down, they feel lifted. And so do you. So, if this message resonates with you, take a moment to like this video, share it with a friend who might need to hear it, and comment below. What's one thing other than health you love to talk about? We'd love to hear your voice, not just your vitals. And just as constantly talking about your health can unintentionally push others away, so too can something even more subtle, clinging too tightly to outdated beliefs. That brings us to habit number 8, being stubborn about the way things used to be and resisting the way things are now. As we grow older, it's natural to hold on to the values and ideas that helped shape our lives. Many of those beliefs gave us structure, helped us raise families, build careers, and make sense of the world. But there's a quiet danger in assuming that what was right then is still the only right now. The world has changed. Fast. From technology to gender roles to how people talk about mental health, today's culture is built on perspectives that simply didn't exist a few decades ago. And when someone responds to those changes with phrases like, "That's just not how I was raised," or "This generation is too soft," it doesn't come across as wisdom. It comes across as unwillingness. The people around you, especially younger ones, may not argue back, but they do notice. They quietly stop sharing parts of their lives with you. A 2022 report by the American Psychological Association found that nearly 61% of adults under age 35 avoid talking about social issues or personal identity with older family members because they fear judgment or dismissal. That's more than half of a generation choosing emotional distance, not out of rebellion, but out of self-protection. I think of Henry, a retired police officer in his early 70s, strong, proud, and deeply principled. But after his granddaughter came out as non-binary, he didn't know how to respond. At a family dinner, he blurted, "I don't get all this nonsense. You're either a boy or a girl." It wasn't meant to be cruel. He was confused. But the damage was done. His granddaughter stopped attending family events. It wasn't until Henry took the time to ask his daughter, "Can you help me understand?" that things began to change. He read a few articles, he watched a video she sent. He didn't have to change everything he believed, but he made space for someone else's reality, and that space became the bridge. His granddaughter came back, cautiously at first, but eventually with trust. That's the power of staying open. You don't lose your identity by listening, you deepen it. Holding on to what shaped you is good, but when you refuse to consider a different point of view, you stop growing. And whether you're 35 or 85, growth is what keeps your spirit young. True wisdom isn't just about knowing what's right. It's about knowing when to listen, when to ask questions, and when to say, "I never thought of it that way." In a world that's constantly evolving, the most respected voices are not the loudest. They're the ones willing to learn, even now, especially now. And just as holding tightly to outdated beliefs can create emotional distance, there's another habit that can create physical distance, moving through public spaces without awareness. That brings us to habit number 9, walking or standing in ways that unintentionally disrupt those around you. As we age, it's normal for our pace to slow, our steps to become more cautious, and our focus to shift inward, especially if we're managing pain or balance issues. But what often goes unnoticed is how this impacts the people around us, at the grocery store, in the post office, at the airport, or even in church hallways. It's easy to stop in the middle of a narrow aisle to check a label, or to drift slowly into the center of a sidewalk without realizing others are trying to get by. You're not trying to be inconsiderate, you're simply focused on staying steady or finishing a task. But to others, especially younger or hurried individuals, it can feel like you're unaware or even dismissive of their time and space. Most won't say anything. Instead, they quietly move around you, exchange glances, or choose to avoid walking with you again. A study conducted in 2020 by the Journal of Environmental Psychology found that older adults who were perceived as spatially unaware in public places were more likely to be socially excluded or treated with impatience, particularly in urban environments. It's a subtle dynamic, but it builds. I recall Margaret, 75, who loved her morning walks at the local park. She often met friends there, but over time, people stopped inviting her to walk with them. She didn't understand why, until a neighbor mentioned that she had a habit of stopping abruptly on narrow trails or drifting sideways without noticing cyclists or joggers. "I guess I was just in my own head," she admitted. Margaret didn't need to speed up. She simply started walking a bit more to the side, checking behind her before pausing and staying aware of the flow around her. Her friends noticed the change. They felt more comfortable walking with her again, not because she walked faster, but because she showed awareness. And that's what matters. Moving with intention and consideration is a quiet form of respect. It says, "I'm still part of this world, and I care about how I affect it." You don't need perfect balance or quick reflexes, just a bit of mindfulness, a simple glance around, a decision to step aside rather than stop mid-path. These are small things, but they carry weight. They show people that you're not just present, you're present with others. And that presence fosters ease, safety, and closeness in the people who share space with you, whether for a minute or a mile. And just as our physical presence in shared spaces can affect how others experience us, so too can our sense of humor, especially when it hasn't quite kept up with the times. That brings us to habit number 10, making jokes that no longer land well or that quietly offend. Humor is one of the greatest gifts of aging. It helps us stay lighthearted, resilient, and relatable. But not all jokes age gracefully. What once drew laughter at the dinner table or around the office might now be met with polite smiles, awkward silences, or quick subject changes. It's not that people have lost their sense of humor. It's that the world has become more aware of how words impact others. Jokes that poke fun at someone's race, gender, body, background, or personal choices may have once been considered harmless. Today, they're often heard as dismissive or hurtful, even when the intent is innocent. A 2022 report by the Institute for Family Studies found that more than 64% of adults under 35 say they frequently cringe when older relatives make what they call out-of-touch or insensitive jokes, and over half said they were less likely to engage in meaningful conversation afterward. I think of George, a retired electrician in his late 60s. He loved telling old barbershop jokes, some harmless, others less so. At a family gathering, he teased his niece's boyfriend, saying, "Back in my day, men didn't wear earrings unless they were pirates." He laughed. The young man chuckled politely, but the room went quiet. Later, his niece told him it embarrassed him. He's been self-conscious ever since. George was stunned. "I didn't mean anything by it," he said, and he didn't. But meaning well doesn't erase impact. George began rethinking his humor, not giving it up, just redirecting it. He focused on clever wordplay, funny memories, even self-deprecating stories that made people laugh with him instead of at someone else. And it worked. People laughed more. Genuinely this time. They leaned into conversations instead of away. That's the quiet magic of updated humor. When your jokes show awareness, humility, and kindness, you're not just being funny, you're being welcoming. And people feel that. Humor, at its best, builds bridges. It invites connection. It signals that you understand not just the world you came from, but the one you're standing in today. You don't need to tiptoe or be overly cautious, just thoughtful. Before telling a joke, ask, is this going to bring people together or quietly push someone out? Because when your laughter is rooted in care, it becomes something people want to be around, something that lifts the room, something that lasts. And just as humor has the power to draw people in or quietly push them away, so too does how we handle our independence. That leads us to habit number 11, acting helpless when you're not. This one can be tricky because it's rarely about laziness. More often, it's about fear, habit, or even love. As we age, it's natural to ask for help more often. Some tasks get harder, some technology gets more confusing, and asking for a hand isn't a weakness, it's wisdom. But when we start asking for help with things we can still do, or default to saying, "I don't know how," without even trying, it changes how others relate to us. The people around us, especially family, begin to shift from companions to caretakers. And that shift, if it happens too often, leads to quiet frustration, emotional fatigue, and even resentment. A 2021 study by the National Alliance for Caregiving reported that nearly 1 in 3 adult children providing informal support to older parents felt emotionally drained when their loved one frequently asked for assistance with tasks they believed could be done independently. I think of Evelyn, 74, a widow who lived alone and was still quite sharp and capable. But after her daughter gifted her a new tablet, Evelyn immediately handed it back and said, "You set it up. I'll never figure it out anyway." This repeated with other things, remote controls, online forms, even basic cooking steps. Over time, her daughter started avoiding visits. "Every time I go over, I end up doing everything for her," she confessed. When Evelyn found out, she was crushed. She hadn't meant to be a burden, she just didn't want to fail. But when she started trying again, burning a few dinners, messing up a few apps, laughing at herself through the process, something shifted. Her daughter leaned back in. Their relationship felt more equal again because effort matters. It shows people you're still in the game, still curious, still strong in the ways that count. No one expects you to lift heavy boxes or master every gadget. But when you stop trying altogether, people don't just feel needed, they feel responsible. And over time, that responsibility can feel like weight. But when you strike a balance, doing what you can, asking clearly when you truly can't, something beautiful happens. People don't help you out of obligation. They help with joy, with pride, knowing you value your own strength as much as they do. And they see you not as someone fading, but as someone adapting. Someone who still says, "Let me try first." And that mindset, quiet, brave, resilient, speaks louder than age ever could. And just as leaning too quickly on others can quietly chip away at mutual respect, so can something far less visible, but just as powerful, always needing to be right. That brings us to habit number 12, insisting on being correct even when it costs connection. As we age, our confidence in what we know naturally grows. We've lived through decades of hard-earned lessons, trial and error, victories and losses. And it's only human to feel that we've figured out how the world works. But sometimes, that confidence becomes a shield. We interrupt to correct small details. We insist that our way is the only way. We dismiss new ideas with a shrug and a line like, "Trust me, I know better." And while that might feel like truth-telling to us, to others, especially the younger people in our lives, it can feel like dismissal. They stop challenging us, not because we've convinced them, but because they're tired of not being heard. According to a 2020 study from the Stanford Center on Longevity, nearly 58% of adults under 40 said they avoid deeper conversations with older relatives because they feel those discussions always turn into debates or lectures. That emotional shutdown can happen quietly. I remember Martin, 78, a retired high school principal, sharp as ever. He loved discussing politics, current events, and science with his grandchildren, but he had a habit of correcting them, mid-sentence, mid-thought, whenever they brought up something he disagreed with. "That's not how it is," he'd say. "Let me tell you what's really going on." Eventually, his granddaughter stopped bringing up anything serious. She smiled, nodded, changed the topic. When Martin finally asked why she seemed distant, she said, "It just feels like you're not interested in hearing me, only in proving you're right." That moment changed him, not overnight, but deeply. He began to pause more, to ask, "What makes you feel that way?" instead of launching into an argument. He started choosing curiosity over correction, and slowly their conversations returned, not as lectures, but as mutual exploration. Because here's the truth. Being right is often overrated. It may win the moment, but it can lose the relationship. The people we admire most in life aren't those who always had the last word. They're the ones who listened, even when they disagreed, who made space for others to grow, who held their wisdom with humility, not pride. And when we let go of the need to be right, we gain something far better. The chance to be remembered not just as knowledgeable, but as kind, not just as experienced, but as wise in the truest sense. Because real wisdom leaves room for others to speak, to feel safe, and to be seen. Even when we disagree, especially when we disagree. And now that we've walked through these 12 quiet habits, it's time to pause, not with guilt or regret, but with honest reflection. Which of these have gently crept into your daily life without you even realizing it? Which ones made you stop and think, that might be me? The truth is, these habits don't make you a bad person. They make you human. They're not failures, they're blind spots. Little patterns that settle in over the years, unnoticed, until someone gently holds up a mirror. And that's what this video has tried to do. Not to criticize, but to care. Because the real beauty of growing older isn't in staying the same. It's in evolving, in being brave enough to look inward, to soften old edges, to open new doors. Aging well doesn't mean clinging to who you were. It means honoring who you are becoming, someone wiser, more self-aware, and more connected to the world around you. The smallest shift in how you listen, speak, walk, or even laugh can ripple out in ways you never imagined. It can draw people closer. It can rebuild warmth where distance had begun to settle. It can remind the world and yourself that you're still here with presence, purpose, and grace. So if something in this video touched you, inspired you, or even challenged you, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you care about, and leave a comment below. What stood out to you? What are you ready to shift? Your thoughts matter more than you know, and your voice might be the encouragement someone else needs to grow too. Thank you for being here, and for being willing to reflect. You're not done growing, not even close.